Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe, if you dare. When I was a kid, I had a classmate over who claimed he was a vampire. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. What is an unexplainable memory from your childhood? Number 1. When I was 10 or 11, I woke up very early in the morning to someone driving down our long driveway. It was dark outside, but I just barely peeped out my window to watch a man look into all of our car windows, survey our flower beds, and finally peer into my bedroom window. I played asleep, and when I looked out the window again, he was driving backwards out of our driveway. In the morning, I mentioned what I saw to everyone, but no one acknowledged hearing or seeing anything, despite the man's headlights being very bright, maybe even switched to brights, and he slammed his car doors very loudly. But I can remember how scary it was having his face pressed against the window above my head and praying he didn't try the lock. No one believes me to this day. I swear it was not a dream. Number 2. Commenter. When I was a kid, I had a classmate over who claimed he was a vampire. I didn't believe him. I told him if his eyes glow in the dark, that would prove he was a vampire. We went into the bathroom and I turned off the light. His eyes were glowing. It scared the crap out of me. I opened the door, ran outside, jumped on my bike, and got as far away from my house as I thought I could. When I eventually came back home, the classmate was gone and my dad was pissed that I abandoned my friend. Person B. Actually, I have a memory that is relatively similar to your story. One day in first grade, I went to the bathroom with a friend because we both had to at the same time. Coincidentally, we were talking about some paranormal shit like ghosts, etc. So I was done a bit quicker than him, and so I got out of the bathroom before him. I remember walking back from the bathroom to our classroom, but he weirdly didn't get out of the bathroom. When I looked back, the bathroom was about 20 meters away and there was a broad long hall we were going through, so I had to see him if he got out. I just thought, man, how long does it take him to wash his hands? And creepily, when I walked into the classroom again, he just effing sat at his table. I asked him how fast he was able to go from there to here without me seeing, but he didn't know what I meant. And when I told him about, for example, we walked to the bathroom and stuff, he was confused because he said that we never did go to the bathroom together. There was physically no effing way he could have gone past without me noticing it. To this day, I am still asking myself what happened this day and if this was a real memory of mine. Person C. This awoke a creepy memory from my childhood, irrelevant, essentially just posting here so I remember again at some point. I remember it was late at night. I lived in my grandparents' house at the time. I went into the bathroom and before I could turn on the light, I saw a glow coming from outside, interrupted only by a shadow from the other side of the window. It was like that of a tiny person sitting across the window. Its limbs moved like it was a cardboard cutout bolted together at the joints. 'Twas odd indeed. Scared my 3 or year-old self quite a bit. Person D. Something like this happened to me. I woke up on the top bunk bed, facing the window, and there was a weird glow and the faces of 2 kids, a girl and boy, on the other side of the glass. My curtains were closed though, so it didn't make sense how I could see the clear faces, plus the glow kind of showed all features sort of inverted, or perhaps like if you hold a torch under your face. It's hard to explain. Anyway, I woke my sister up on the bottom bunk, and when I looked back, they had gone. Number 3. I hope this counts. It was unexplainable when I was a child, but I've since learned more. My father was the youngest of 11 kids. That meant I had a lot of aunts and uncles. I didn't meet all of them growing up as a child, but I met quite a few. However, I was always told growing up that it was impossible for me to have met one specific aunt, because she died long ago. Yet I remembered meeting this aunt at my grandparents' house when my grandmother's funeral was being held. I was a young kid, age 10, and there were very few cousins my age in attendance. In fact, my being there was seen as offensive to some of the aunts and uncles because death isn't for children. This was back in 1979, so there was very little to occupy my time. I ate food, because there was a lot of food on the table. I sat and listened to what the grown-ups were saying, and quickly lost track because I didn't understand a bit of it. Eventually, my father got sick of being told that I was not welcome and handed me a bag of toy cars and sent me into a back room, where I couldn't be seen or heard. I played with the cars for a while when a woman came in. She said she was my aunt, because she was my father's sister and not because she was married to any of my father's brothers. She was obviously older than my dad, but definitely wanted to play cars with me, which I thought was very strange. She wasn't dressed in black like everyone else, and she talked funny. We had fun playing with cars for a while, then she left. Everyone insisted for decades that it was impossible for me to have met her, and that I was wrong. I was also admonished many times to stop bringing it up, stop mentioning her name, and, most especially, to stop referring to her as my aunt or to imply that she was a sibling to my father or any of his other siblings. So, here's where I explain what I learned as an adult. This sibling was born wrong somehow. She might have been developmentally disabled, had cerebral palsy, hell, she might just have been on the autism spectrum. But in the time that she was a child, you didn't acknowledge children like that. She was, literally, locked in an attic room, and left there, fed in the room and never talked to, or let out of the room. When she was still a child, but not yet an adult, she was taken from the house and put into a special home, a nice phrase that meant insane asylum, where she was warehoused for the rest of her life. The younger siblings were only told that she died, while the older ones were aware that she was taken away. She was still alive until 1987, at least. And it was very possible and likely that one of her older siblings might have brought her home for the funeral of her mother where I met her. Number 4. Commenter. Only my neighbor was able to make it to my birthday party because of an incredibly strong and sudden snowstorm. I remember the day and the snow so clearly, but my birthday is in July. Person B. It may be that you confounded your birthday with another celebration to you. It's usual to relate a big party with your birthday, but it may have been another celebration that had you involved, and casually was a snowstorm. Person C. I remember it snowing in the middle of summer once when I was a kid. I ran inside to get my snow gear, and when I came back out the snow was already melted. I am certain it snowed, but my mom doesn't remember it. Person D. When I was a kid I saw it snow in June once, right before school let out. Granted, I live in Maine, but it really did happen, snowed like crazy for about half an hour. They brought all of us inside, and I remember the teachers seemed very confused about it. Number 5. Commenter. My family and I were driving out of Bellows, a campsite/beach for military families in Hawaii. I lazily gaze out the window and something catches my eye. About 30 feet away in a clearing before a metal gate leading into the forest was a massive bird. Like 8 feet tall and massive. It had a long neck, brown feathers, and very thick long legs. My jaw dropped and I was still processing what I had seen when my dad said, "What the hell was that?" Turns out he had seen it too, and we both described it identically. No one else saw it, and by the time our brains had caught up with our eyes it was too late to turn around. I will always regret not turning around. When we returned later in the day there was nothing there. When we asked a guard about it he laughed at us. I scoured the internet afterward, and it looked like nothing I could find. At least, nothing that isn't extinct. It looked amazingly similar to one of the larger species of moa. But those lived in New Zealand thousands of miles away and died out hundreds of years ago. This happened back in 2009, and to this day I wonder whether I saw a Lazarus species. Edit. I appreciate all the attempts to help illuminate what my dad and I saw. I've looked up many of the bird suggestions and am afraid the legs and neck were just too long and thick to match. I've thought about a freakishly large emu before as a possibility. However, I think that Pokemon and Ups Kevin are the most promising choices. Person B. This jarred some childhood memories. I lived on farmland in the country. We didn't farm, my family owned and leased the land, and so I was pretty familiar with the local wildlife. I'd seen plenty of eagles and owls in the past, so I could recognize them from a distance. Well, one day as I'm riding home in the car, my dad points at one of the power lines along the road, and perched on top I see something huge. This thing looked taller than me, too solid of a profile to be a crane, too big to be an eagle or turkey vulture. It was still half a mile away or so I couldn't make out any fine details or colors, and before we got close enough to see it well, it swooped down off the pole and flew away. Never saw anything like it again. F looked bigger than our car. My dad is convinced to this day we saw a pterodactyl. Grandma thinks it was a thunderbird. Number 6. I remember laying in bed one night, staring hard out the window because it was storming pretty bad. All of a sudden, it got even darker than it was, and my mom calmly walked in my room and said, "Stop looking out the window, honey. It's not safe." Then she left, and I saw garbage tossed into the air, and I could hear the shingles slapping against the roof cause they nearly got ripped off. Pretty obvious it was a tornado, but the next day, my parents acted like nothing happened. We went outside at one point and everything looked the same as it always was, so I don't know if it really happened or if it was a dream. I'll have to ask my mom later and see if she remembers anything about that day. Number 7. My sister and I apparently both had the same dream one night, a scary one. We were staying in this villa where we had to share a room, and we both woke up suddenly. The window was open, when it hadn't been before. I realized she was awake as well and told her I'd had a bad dream, and as I started to describe it, she started talking along with me, describing the same dream. In it, this black creature that looked like a bull, only it had shiny, scaly, plastic-looking skin, was standing in the open window with this weird mechanical device, and it somehow fired a projectile at the lamp in the room, which started rocking back and forth. Neither of us wanted to get up and close the window in case the thing was actually out there, so we called for our mom and she closed it, reassured us in typical mom fashion, etc. For months we would talk about that incident, and we could never figure out how we both managed to have the same exact dream at the same time. Number 8. Commenter. My mother walked into my room, waking me up to tell me that most of the world's population was dead. I spent the rest of the day as normal, eating breakfast, going shopping with her, going to a playground, then eating dinner, albeit acting quite nervous throughout. The next day, she tried to make it clear that what started the previous morning wasn't true. I asked her if she remembered, but she told me she didn't. I'm certain it wasn't a dream, because I recalled the rest of what happened the previous day to her, only to be met by her confirmation that everything I remembered was correct, right down to how shaky I was and how upset I seemed. All except for the part that humanity was on the brink of extinction. P.S. I am aware that, yes, it is true that most of the world's population is dead. What I meant when I originally wrote this was that most of the living population just dropped dead overnight. Person B. I had an extremely similar experience to this when I was younger. My mom told me this in the morning, and I went about most of my day thinking most of humanity was gone, and seeing practically no one around. But my second grade brain, in the middle of the day, suddenly said, "This doesn't make sense, why would most of the world population disappear?" And suddenly, I could see everyone, and realized everything was fine. A very surreal experience. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.